Hi everyone! Today we will talk about cellular automata. It is one of the very few alternatives to programming language and to think computer science differently. There is a lot more freedom and also this feeling to look at a tiny world evolving in silence. They are like exoplanets to discover, having different rules, different landscape. In this video, we will question: is there an equivalent of life that can occur in cellular automata? We will first explore the most important properties to understand them and answer this question. First property is simplicity. Cellular automata are easy to understand and to implement, because we only need to define how one cell must act depending on its neighbors and apply it to everywhere. So first, a CA has a grid, or any graph arrangement of cells. It could be one-dimensional line, 3D lattice, hexagonal tiling, but most of the time it is a 2D grid. Then there is an internal state for each cell. It could be discrete or continuous, or even multidimensional. Then a set of neighbor cells to interact with, and finally a transition rule, a function that takes in input neighbor state and give output state for the next iteration. One must expect some little variations sometimes, but the core idea is the same. With this, you picture all the cosmos of CA. But this definition is so wide that there are actually subset of rules that define subset of CA, like the galaxy of CA, with similar behavior, but still a lot of diversity. Which brings us to our second point, diversity. Let's have a look at the different family of CA. First, the lifelike. You may have heard of Game of Life, the most popular CA. It was discovered by John Conway in 1970 and shows a very likely form of life. CA has two states, alive or dead. Transition is made depending on the number of alive cells. This way of defining CA gives a lot of interesting alternatives. Then the one-dimensional or elementary CA. It has been studied by Stephen Wolfram and are the most simple form of CA. Just one line, two states, and three neighbor cells. It has been used to show diversity of behavior CA can have. Then the self-replication family. It includes all the attempts made to study the self-replication machine. There is Langton loops, but also John von Neumann self-replication CA. Then the Margolis CA. This is a special family of block cellular automata where the transition function is made not for one cell, but for a 2x2 block. It gives CA conservative law and much more link with physics. Then MNCA family, which stands for Multiple Neighborhood Cellular Automata. It is an extension of lifelike CA with a lot more neighbors and special transition functions that can reach very biological-like behavior. Then partial differential equation. It might sound a little bit strange, but when you discretize a partial differential equation of space and time, you end up with a continuous CA which has its own family. Then Linear. It is an alternative to Game of Life but in a continuous domain. There are also some kind of emergent lifelike shapes. So now that we have an idea of all the shapes CI can take, let's have a look to complexity. Like planets, CA are more or less complex. Some are like the Moon, a dead rock with static and repetitive landscapes, where almost nothing happens. Others are like Jupiter, gas storms everywhere, where nothing happens either but in another way. And some are like Venus. We can't say nothing happened, but we can say it is completely random either. This situation has been named The Age of Chaos by the mathematician Dwayne Fromm. A situation where you must have enough complexity but not too much, some chaos but not too much to see emergent pattern. Another way to say that is talking about predictability. On the Moon, things are very predictable, on Jupiter not at all, and on Venus there are pockets of repetition but also pockets of randomness. This classification is completely related to the Wolfram classification of CA. Let's see some other examples of these situations. Another important property of CA is entropy. Some CAs obey to second law of thermodynamics. If you don't know what this is, let me show you quickly with this example. Here is a marvelous CA that behaves like a ball billiard of cells. At the init, there are blue and red balls on each side. You don't see the future, but you can guess that this configuration will never happen again. Everything will mix up. This is because mixing states is the most likely configuration. Among all enumeration of configuration, the most probable is the disorder. Order is always less probable. To say things are mixing up, we say more formally that entropy increases. Second law is actually saying that entropy increases and is only about statistics. It is not even related to any underlying rules. And when you think about it, there is no reason it couldn't apply to CA. But here I used a CA with conservative law, like in our universe. What happens in general with CA that are not conservative, but expanding instead? So let's see all the situations we can have depending on complexity and conservation. For the conservation case, in a repetitive world, entropy stabilizes at low values. In a chaotic world, entropy stabilizes in higher values, and at the edge of chaos, things increase and stabilize. The fact that this is conservative creates a kind of boundary for complexity and entropy. Let's see the other case of expansion in a repetitive world. Entropy stabilizes too, because distribution never changes, whether it expands to infinity or not. In chaotic behavior, entropy increases forever, and here there is no conservation boundary, no limit in the complexity. And the situation is the same at the edge of chaos, since there is always some part of randomness, but also a part of repetition, so it increases a little bit slower. This property helps us to understand that in CA2, entropy and disorder is an issue, and the emergence of life implies entropy should decrease, because that is one of the fundamental properties of life, a self-organized and self-replication structure that works against the second law of thermodynamics. It implies some kind of order locally. Let's see some core property of life in CA, self-replication. Self-replication is an uncommon phenomenon to observe in CA, even as an emerging pattern. There are multiple degrees of self-replication. The most obvious form might be the oscillators. It is not very self-replication, but that is already a big constraint on emerging patterns, to stay stable across time with any number of periods. In the game of life, there are a lot of oscillators static or moving. They do not have a lot of cells or periods since it's simple structure. Then, self-replication. We can see one in the high life CA. It is a quite simple one, 12 cells and a period of 12. There is a last type of self-replication, the universal constructors. In an attempt to understand life, it has been studied in the Light of CA by Newman. He was inspired from DNA. By the way, the machine is reading a tape having the information to replicate. So he created a 29-state CA that he initialized in a very precise configuration. Here is a small version of about 25,000 cells and 200,000 iterations. Getting a replication machine isn't easy at all. The code behind is very big, so he proves that it is possible, but it is not emerging at all like in the other cases. CI here is used as a programming language, and this is why it has too much control and not enough emergence. What we are looking for is life that can find its own way to replicate, without telling it to do so, and with simple rules. But it gives an idea how complicated it could be in Game of Life or any other CA to see a universal constructor emerge or an equivalent of DNA structure. We have seen everything we needed to start answering the question, is there life on cellular automata? The first way to answer is to say, if we create a hypothetical CA that mimics exactly biochemical reaction, DNA, protein, we will end up with life. So CA is certainly the best candidate to receive life, rather than programming language, for example. So in theory, yes. But in practice, that will be very complex. And we can ask rather, what properties should the CA have to receive life? So what we have seen so far is that life needs to be on the edge of chaos. Not too simple, not too complex. Life needs a stabilized entropy. Like on Earth, the environment stays to a stable entropy, not too high, not too low. Life needs to emerge. We should not hardcode things or use CA like programming language, or the mechanisms to make life will appear fake. And life needs self-replicating structure. We can extend this list a little from what we observe from life. Life appears in water. It helps a lot of molecules to interact with each other. We do not observe that in gas or solid. That is again an equilibrium. Molecules are not too far from each other and not too close, so that a lot of interaction can happen. Then, life uses membrane. It is a core concept for life. It comes from the bilayer lipid, which has the ability to create closed areas very easily, so that life can have any chance to drop entropy inside. Life also uses energy to drop the entropies through the concept of metabolism. It is basically the ability to reduce the complexity, the entropy of a membrane, or make it live. That is a consequence of the second law principle. Entropy naturally increases, so it will cost some effort, some energy to make it decrease. So, for our CA, we can translate this observation. Life needs an environment that maximizes the interaction of any pattern. Life needs emergence of membrane pattern or anything that could lead to the building of closed areas. And if any closed areas are created, life needs effort to fight entropy in that zone, some kind of equivalent of energy. So here is a recipe to build a CA with life on it. There are, however, limitations for creating life in itself. Let's say that list is exact, you are still constrained by emergence. You need to wait a lot of time before seeing anything happening. And the bigger your world is, the earlier it will emerge. You could also take a shortcut, start with the best initial condition, but you should be careful to not hardcode too much things. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy it. Don't hesitate to subscribe and see you soon.